who scream and run away when they see any kind of creepy crawly. I didn't just dislike them, I was terrified of them, and my attitude really to most insects was that they should all be burnt with fire, because I found them truly terrifying. So it's kind of weird that I am now the beetle lady, and I genuinely love them. And one of the things that occurred to me when I set out on this adventure was inspired by an article that I read by A.A. Gill about his visit to the Natural History Museum when he found a specimen, a beetle specimen, that he thought might be a brand new species. So he took it to the Natural History Museum, which is where you take your discoveries, to find out if he had indeed discovered a new species of beetle, which I think he hoped might be named after him. And sadly, it wasn't a new species of beetle, but in this article he described the collection. And there were photographs of the beetles in the Natural Histories collection. And it's the first time I've ever found an insect to be beautiful. I was so surprised when I was reading this article. And so it began a fascination that has turned into a passion. And the thing for me about the Natural History collection, which for those of you who have read Beetle Boy, the entire adventure starts in the Natural History Museum. My hero's father, Bartholomew Cuttle, is the Director of Science at the Natural History Museum. And the reason why I started it there is because, to me, every single one of these beetles is a story. There is a story behind the person who went to that place in that country and found that particular beetle, and how they caught that beetle, and how they pinned that beetle, preserved that beetle, brought it back to the UK, possibly like Darwin put it in their own collection. Maybe that collection was split up and then ended up in the Natural History Museum, and in 100 years' time that beetle will still be there. And who knows what scientific notions and ideas that beetle will provide us with. Maybe ideas about habitat loss or climate change. This collection is, how many millions have you got?
About 9 to 10 million beetles.
10 million stories in one building. I mean, to me, as a story writer, I mean, that's a treasure trove. I don't think I could ever get bored looking, studying, meeting, finding out the stories behind these beetles. None of them are boring. Some of you may know I have a non-fiction book that's being published in September about beetles. Max has very kindly helped me and written an excerpt at the end, but also checked it to make sure I didn't get anything wrong. And the thing that really fascinated me about writing that book was it gave me the opportunity to actually tell some of the stories behind some of the actual beetles that are in the Natural History collection. So as I said, I have stalked you for 10 years. I have watched all the videos on YouTube, and I've read all the blog posts, and I have done my research thoroughly. But I wanted to excite children and adults alike to love these creatures and see the value in these creatures as much as I did. I feel very bad that I spent at least 2 decades loathing insects, and so now I'm trying to make up for it. So I created this trilogy. For those of you who don't know, and I'm guessing that's probably mostly the adults in the room, in the first book, Darkus, the Beetle Boy, my hero, his father, the Director of Science at the Natural History Museum, Bartholomew Cuttle, mysteriously vanishes from inside an entomology vault underneath the museum, which is a fictional creation of my own. There is no vault under the museum that I know of.
I think it's got mollusks in it.
Mollusks. I'm so not down with mollusks. They eat all my plants. So his father goes mysteriously missing, and Darkus sets out on an adventure to try and find his father and bring him home. But it is a journey of discovery. At the beginning of the book, Darkus, like me, knows nothing about beetles and doesn't know what he thinks or feels about beetles. And as he goes through the adventure, he discovers a passion, a love, information, interest, vocabulary, and friendship through the beetles. It also meets a really, truly hideous evil villain called Lucretia Cutter. And in the first book, you don't really know what she's up to. You know she's evil, but you don't know what her evil plan is. In the second book, Beetle Queen, her evil plan becomes apparent, and Darkus and his friends set out to try and stop her. And then in the third book, which I'm really here to talk about today, there is an epic battle where my hero, Beetle Boy, and my villain, Beetle Queen, fight it out in the Amazon with many species of awesome beetle. One of the things that I discovered whilst learning about beetles is that many, 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 many years ago, at a time when there were dinosaurs roaming the planet, insects were a lot bigger than they are now. I believe the theory that I have read is that because the oxygen in the air was a greater percentage, it meant that insects who have a particular way of breathing were able to be larger. Now, because of the oxygen percentage in the air, if they grow beyond a certain size, they don't get enough oxygen from the air to be able to move. So I thought, wow, hyper-oxygenated giant beetles sounds pretty cool to me. So I did a little bit of research on that, and I take all of the facts that I find and obviously take them to the most extreme fictional lengths that I can whilst still being plausible. I'm very proud that I've managed to include 60 different species of beetles in my books. But 60 species of beetle is nothing when there are 400,000 on the planet. My books are a drop in the beetle ocean. So yes, the third book is all about that epic battle. And I knew that for us to want to read these adventures, we human beings that are obsessed with ourselves, my heroes had to be human. But with each of my heroes, I wanted there to be a companion, a beetle companion. And so from all the species that I discovered, I looked for what I thought would be the most interesting species that would capture people's imaginations. These are pages from the non-fiction book because they've been illustrated by an incredible illustrator called Karim Nahabu. And these are the species that I chose to be at the heart of the trilogy. This is the Calcosoma, and we have a tray of Calcosomas for you to see. Oh, wonderful, Max, if you hold it up. I described the Calcosoma in my first book as being as big as a hamster, and people think that I'm exaggerating, but I am not. And they are incredibly beautiful beetles, so you must come and visit them at the end. And what amazed me was that, of course, these things have wings, and those wings are like an amber colour. They're beautiful and they fly. I mean, I think they're amazing. Am I right in thinking that you collected some of those specimens?
I think this one with the wings open.
Where did you collect that from?
That was in the mountains in North Borneo.
You see, this is the other thing, right? People who think like, oh, people who love insects are weird. If you love insects, you go on expeditions to the mountains of Borneo. Hello. That's the other thing that I wanted to do in my books, was make it very apparent that just like Indiana Jones made archaeologists cool, I absolutely want to do the same for entomology, because it's a fascinating subject, and if you study these things, you do go on expeditions and discover amazing creatures like that. Oh, is that one in a pupa there?
That's a pupa, yes. That's out of a compost heap in Kuala Lumpur.
You've got to come and see these guys afterwards, they're amazing. So this is the Calcosoma, and the rhinoceros beetle is the hero of the entire trilogy. This is the frog-leg leaf beetle, who is befriended by Virginia, Marvin, and you'll see on each of the slides there's like handwriting at the top. It's because the whole book is annotated by the children. This is Hepburn, the jewel beetle that becomes best friends with Novak, and this is Newton, the firefly that becomes best friends with Bertolt. Each child has a beetle companion that helps them all the way through the trilogy and allows me to explore the beetles in a way that, I mean, I'm not entirely sure, but when you read a lot of children's books, mammals are often given very human characteristics and seen to be friendly and cuddly and lovely. But no one really does it for invertebrates. No one ever makes out how cuddly and friendly and awesome and characteristically cool invertebrates are. And that's one of the things I really wanted to do in the story. For the children, the beetles that they befriend are a really important part of who those characters are. So for example, Bertolt, who's a very clever, quite shy character, he befriends Newton the firefly, and they become friends because Bertolt is scared of the dark. And at the moment when he is terrified in the dark, clinging onto a ladder, the firefly comes and lights his way. for Darcus, right at the beginning of the trilogy, his father is taken from him. He is very vulnerable and weak and powerless to do anything about it. And he befriends a rhinoceros beetle, the strongest creature on the planet, a steady, trustworthy friend. And so each beetle reveals something of the child's character, but equally the child reveals something about the beetle. And I really hoped to kind of set fire to children's imagination so they could see how wonderful these creatures actually are. And then here they are. Here are my team with their beetles. There's Bertolt with Newton the firefly, Darcus with his rhinoceros beetle, and Virginia with the frog-legged leaf beetle. I had to make the protagonists of this story children. When I wrote the books, I really didn't think they were just for children. But adults are quite closed-minded. We've made up our opinions of who we are, what we like, what we don't like, what we're scared of, what we believe in. So I couldn't make this book be for adults because there's absolutely no way that a full grown-up would have opened their eyes to the beauty of insects if they have already decided they don't like them. And I know that because I was one of those people who would swear blind that it was a core part of my personality that I loathed insects. I am not lying when I say to you that if I got in a time machine right now and I got out of the time machine and met the 18-year-old me and I said, you know what, in the future, you're going to be an author and you're going to write 4 entire books about beetles. It's going to become your life's passion. You're going to keep live beetles at home. You're going to go into schools and encourage children to build beetle hotels. I would have looked at future me and been like, no, crazy lady from the future. That is never going to happen. I might have even probably slapped me for coming out with such an outrageous statement. Because to say that I loathed beetles is really an understatement. I never would have believed that I would end up on the front cover of Antenna, the Royal Entomology Society's magazine, as the poster girl for beetles. Like, how is that possible? And this is the thing, most adults are. We think we know who we are. But I am here to demonstrate that even if you think you don't like invertebrates, all you have to do really is get to know them. A lot of my fear was related to ignorance. And the thing about children is ignorance isn't a problem. Ignorance is an opportunity for curiosity and discovery. Darwin was a big kid who loved to look at beetles. He changed the entire human path by coming up with the origin of species. Virginia, in my story, her full name is Virginia Wallace. She is named after Wallace because he too came up with the origin of species but didn't quite get the credit that Darwin does. Each of my characters tries to open up a little bit of the entomological world and make it appealing and exciting for everyone. So even if you're a grown-up in this room and you haven't read my books, you should, okay? Particularly if you don't like beetles. But I had to make the children the protagonists because they think clearly. The future is theirs, okay? Everything that we have done to this planet, they are going to either have to rectify or deal with. And ultimately in the 3rd book, in Battle of the Beetles, my undercurrent of the theme that I have been writing about over the course of the story really comes to the fore. And so I want to read to you a little bit about, oh, that's the wrong slide, from that book. The bit that I'm going to read doesn't have any spoilers, but it does give away my villain's thoughts, thinking process, what she's been up to. Now, I always have to stand to read, so I'm just going to make a little space. Bartholomew walked over to the piano. "Do you still play, Lucy?" He ran his fingers over the ivory keys, playing a random series of notes. "I remember you were really rather good once." "That's gratifying to hear." She tipped her head back. "Yes, I still play. Music is the soul's expression after all." "You still believe you have a soul then?" "Souls aren't exclusive to humans, Bartholomew," she replied. Elephants, monkeys, beetles, all living creatures have souls. I believe trees have souls, don't you? Barty levelled his gaze at her, unreadable compound eyes. What you are planning to do, what you are already doing, is going to result in the deaths of millions of people. You are committing genocide. I fail to see how you can talk about expressing your soul through music when you set about committing mass murder with a smile on your lips. Lucretia's nostrils flared with anger. She swept over to the piano in a series of lurching steps and sat down. She placed her 2 human hands on the keys, nails painted black, fingers weighed down by diamond rings, and she began to play. "Is everything so black and white to you?" she said as she played the first notes of a tune that Barty faintly recognised. "Aren't humans, as a species, committing mass murder on an immeasurable scale? 40% of all the Earth's animals have become extinct in the last 50 years. Aren't our population growth and addiction to wealth killing this planet? We are hastening our own demise, fighting wars over fossil fuels and nuclear weapons." She played a series of chords, the music building. "What is there about humanity that you think is worth saving? Doesn't your heart grieve for the last elephants, the last giraffes? Don't you wonder what will be left for your grandchildren? Don't you want to stop it all? But of course, you don't see how, do you? You lack vision. The meek shall inherit the earth, the Bible says, and we think that meek means humans. But why are we so obsessed with our own species? Yes, the meek shall inherit the earth. In fact, I plan on giving it to them. I plan on giving it to the beetles." Barty felt her words like hammer blows to his chest. "Do you really think you can take on the governments of the world? I already have. Lucy, they will send nuclear bombs." Ha! She laughed and played, lifting 2 beetle legs onto the higher and lower octaves of the piano. "The big boys with their bad bombs. We must all quake when the bullies shake their fists. Well, not me. The biome is a self-sustaining environment with a hyper-oxygenated atmosphere. The hexagonal design of each panel of military-grade glass used in the windshields of stealth bombers is impenetrable. But even then, more than half the facility is underground. We are safe here. If they bomb me, I'll destroy more of their crops, like I did in India. If they use nuclear weapons, well, the Amazon rainforest is the lungs of the earth. They may as well be bombing themselves. They destroy their soil, their harvests, and their water supplies. I have turned the planet into a giant chessboard, and I have them in checkmate. But why? I am going to change the course of the human race, Bartholomew. I am going to wipe out the human population. I am going to rewild the planet. The humans that will be allowed to live will be the ones that put the environment before their own meaningless lives. I can see how you might think this is a solution, but there is no solution to global warming. We have pushed this planet far beyond the point of no return. That is absolutely not true, Lucy. Barty moved around the piano so he could see her face. You will be punishing the weakest first. The poorest and the youngest will die from starvation. That can't be helped. I am not here to save human beings. I am here to save the planet. I am the only one who cares enough to do anything about it. You're wrong. He brought down his fist on the piano lid, but she kept playing, the rhythm of the music becoming more insistent. There are millions of people who care. Where? She hissed. What I see is people protecting the wealth and power they have by electing politicians who keep the rich rich and make the poor poorer. They do not care about the environment and choose not to believe in climate change. That is not everybody, Barty argued. Where are the revolutions, she cried. Where are the human beings insisting that the environment be the key issue upon which a government is elected? I can't hear their protests. The melody folded and doubled, becoming feverish, Humanity is weak, and that is why the Earth needs me. Humanity is a plague. It's not just climate change, it's sheer space. We're running out of places to grow food for the human horde. There are other ways to tackle population growth, Lucretia. None that will have a big impact fast enough. And anyway, the people in power won't allow it. This is the only way, Bartholomew. She smiled at him, a ghastly leer. Just think of how beautiful this planet will look when I'm done with my cull and the giant insects return. Who made you God? He whispered, shaking his head. I did, and the people will worship me and carry out my edict or die. She leant forward, taking a deep breath in through what was left of her nose. The music rising, a waterfall of notes cascading down the keyboard. Barty suddenly recognized the tune. It was the overture to Tannhauser. Lucy had taken him to the Royal Opera House to see it a long time ago. She'd always loved Wagner. He stepped forward and placed his hand on her shoulder, closing his eyes as she played. Are you really not afraid of the bombs? He asked softly. Let them do their worst. She leant into the keyboard, her body moving with the music. The underground superstructure of the biome can seal off the upper glass houses. We would be untouched by an explosion and free from the impacts of nuclear fallout. We are equipped to survive for some decades here, although the effect on the rest of the planet would be terrible. She laughed. You know, that old adage that the cockroach is the only creature that would survive a nuclear holocaust? Well, it's not true. The beetle is. You've thought of everything. Bartholomew, she looked up at him. You opened my eyes to the beauty of this planet. You dragged me to the cliff's edge and made me open my heart and mind to the natural world. And then you abandoned me to stare down and watch humanity extinguish species after species. Bulldoze and burn habitat after habitat. How many more miles of the Great Barrier Reef can you stomach losing? How much more plastic must be found in the guts of whales? How many square miles of rainforest traded for oil? It has to stop. The human cull is coming, and the planet will heave a sigh of relief when I am done. It will thank me. And that is all the thanks I need. The music fractured into patterns of notes, and she closed her eyes. I know you feel the same way I do, Bartholomew, she sighed. And that is why I trust you. She played the final refrains of the piece, letting the last note hang in the air.